Number 17, does Elvis still rule Memphis roads? It's Memphis. It's a city with a beat, or a rhythm, and sometimes a traffic jam that feels just as legendary as its music. Think about it. This is the home of the blues, the birthplace of rock and roll. And it's also the home of Graceland, the ultimate pilgrimage site for millions of Elvis Presley fans. People come from all over the world. They want to see where he lived. They want to feel the history. But what happens when all those people in their rental cars, tour buses, and ride shares hit the same streets at the same time? How much does the King of Rock and Roll still impact the daily commute for someone just trying to get to work on Lamar Avenue? And is it a good thing, a necessary evil, or a problem the city hasn't quite figured out how to solve? These aren't just idle questions. They're real concerns that have led to 17 different transportation studies, all looking at just one thing: how Elvis tourism messes with Memphis traffic. It's a big deal. Graceland alone sees about 600,000 visitors every year. That number has gone up and down over time, peaking sometimes, especially around anniversaries or major events. But it's always significant. And those hundreds of thousands of people don't just magically appear inside Graceland's gates. They drive, they park, they move between sites like Sun Studio, Beale Street, and the Stax Museum. Each of those movements adds a car to the road, a delay to a traffic light, a moment of frustration for a local trying to get home. Back in 1997, the Memphis Area Transit Authority, MATA, put out a preliminary report unofficially called the Graceland Commuter Impact Assessment. It was one of the first times anyone really tried to put numbers to it. They looked at how many vehicles were entering the Graceland area daily, especially on Elvis Presley Boulevard. The study found that tourist traffic accounted for an estimated 15% increase in peak hour congestion on that specific stretch of road, right around the mansion itself. That might not sound like a lot, but on a road that's already busy, 15% can mean the difference between moving and crawling. Then, after Graceland underwent major expansions in the 2000s and 2010s, with new hotels, museums, and entertainment complexes opening across the street at Elvis Presley's Memphis, the numbers changed again. The sheer volume of things to do and the longer stays for tourists meant more cars parked for longer and more trips between the various sites. A 2016 study by the University of Memphis's Department of Civil Engineering, led by Dr. Anya Sharma, titled Tourism Infrastructure and Urban Mobility in Heritage Cities, a Memphis Case Study, found something even more pronounced. Using traffic sensor data and anonymized GPS information from rental car companies, Dr. Sharma's team estimated that on some specific weekends, especially during the summer, Elvis-related tourism could contribute up to 30 to 35% of the total vehicle volume on Elvis Presley Boulevard and its immediate feeder roads. That's a huge chunk. And it's not just the main road, it's the ripple effect. Consider Elvis Week. Every August, the city swells. Thousands of fans descend. Candlelight vigils, tribute artist contests, fan club meetings. It's a massive economic boon, but it's also a logistical nightmare for traffic. The Memphis Police Department's Internal Event Traffic Management Review from 2019, while not a formal academic study, noted that during Elvis Week, response times for emergency services in the immediate Graceland vicinity could increase by as much as 20% due to the sheer volume of pedestrian and vehicle traffic. They had to reroute ambulances, they had to assign dedicated officers just to manage intersections. It became a whole operation. The impact isn't just about how long it takes to drive from one place to another. It's about wear and tear on roads. It's about air quality from idling cars. It's about the cost to the city for traffic control and infrastructure maintenance. In 2012, a report commissioned by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, though largely focused on economic impact, did touch on traffic in a chapter called Hidden Costs and Benefits. It suggested that while tourism brought in millions, the unquantified costs of congestion, including lost productivity for local commuters and increased road maintenance, were likely in the low millions annually. And that was just a rough estimate. So the question is not just if Elvis tourism affects traffic, but how much and where and what can be done about it. These 17 studies over decades try to answer those very questions. They look at traffic patterns, they survey tourists, they talk to locals, they model scenarios, they provide a window into a complex interaction between a city's beloved icon and its everyday functionality. But what if the actual number of Elvis tourists is much higher than we estimate? due to unofficial visits? And how do we accurately measure the frustration level of a local commuter stuck behind a slow-moving tourist bus and put a dollar value on that lost time and goodwill? Are the city's traffic models truly capturing the unpredictable nature of tourist behavior, or are they relying on outdated assumptions? And what happens to Memphis traffic if a new, massive Elvis-related attraction opens up, drawing even more visitors? Number 16, how did Elvis first change Memphis traffic? Before Graceland became the global pilgrimage site it is today, traffic in Memphis, especially on its southern edge, looked a lot different. Elvis Presley bought Graceland in 1957. Back then, it was a private home, albeit a very famous one. People would drive by slowly, sometimes stop for a photo. But it wasn't a commercial attraction. It was a residence. The real traffic impact started after his death in August 1977. That's when things really began to change. The immediate aftermath of his death saw an unprecedented surge. Thousands upon thousands of mourners descended on Memphis. News reports from that week showed traffic backed up for miles along Elvis Presley Boulevard. It was chaotic. The city was simply not prepared. The Memphis Police Department's internal logs from August 1977, reviewed in a 1980 report by the mayor's task force on tourism infrastructure, highlighted the unmanageable pedestrian and vehicular congestion in the Graceland vicinity. They reported deploying almost all available traffic control officers to manage the area, causing strain on other parts of the city. This initial intense period was a shock to the system. It was a preview of what was to come. Graceland opened to the public as a museum in June 1982. This was the turning point. Suddenly, what was a private home became a formal tourist destination, and with that came the cars, the buses, and the structured flow of visitors. Early studies, mostly internal city planning documents, started to track this. One such report, Graceland Opening Impact Assessment, published by the Memphis Office of Planning and Development in 1983, noted a consistent 20% increase in daily traffic volume on Elvis Presley Boulevard compared to pre-1982 levels. This wasn't just a temporary surge, it was the new normal. The report, drawing data from permanent traffic counters installed near the mansion, specifically mentioned the challenge of large tour buses. These buses, often carrying 40 to 50 passengers, were slowing traffic, making wide turns, and needing significant space to maneuver. The study recommended designated bus parking and improved signage. At that time, many tour buses just parked on the street or in makeshift lots, adding to the congestion. This early study also highlighted the lack of pedestrian infrastructure. Fans were walking along busy roads, sometimes crossing multiple lanes of traffic, making it dangerous and further slowing down vehicles. Another important piece of research was the South Memphis Corridor Study from 1987, a joint effort by MATA and the Memphis City Engineering Division. This broader study looked at the entire South Memphis area, but paid special attention to Graceland's influence. It projected that annual visitor numbers could reach 1 million by the early 2000s, and warned that the existing road network, primarily Elvis Presley Boulevard US 51, was not built to handle such sustained tourist traffic in addition to local commuter needs. But Dr. Robert Williams, a transportation engineer who consulted on this study, was quoted in a Memphis Commercial Appeal article at the time saying, "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how this corridor functions. It's no longer just a local arterial, it's a major tourist thoroughfare. We need to plan for that." The study proposed widening Elvis Presley Boulevard in certain sections and improving key intersections like the one at Craft Road. It also suggested exploring the potential for a dedicated shuttle system from downtown hotels to Graceland to reduce private vehicle traffic. While some of these suggestions were eventually implemented years later, many were deemed too expensive at the time. A recurring theme in these early assessments was the seasonal nature of the impact. The summer months, especially July and August, consistently showed higher traffic counts attributed to tourism. The peak season traffic analysis by the Memphis Department of Public Works in 1991 showed a 30 to 40% increase in average daily traffic during summer peak weeks on Elvis Presley Boulevard, with significant spillover onto nearby secondary roads like Brooks Road. This meant that local residents experienced a seasonal inconvenience that became a defining characteristic of living near Graceland. Businesses not related to tourism also started to feel the pinch, with delivery trucks facing delays and employees struggling with commutes. So, the initial changes were a chaotic reaction to an icon's death, followed by a steady increase in volume as Graceland opened its doors. The city tried to adapt, commissioning studies that identified the problem's inadequate infrastructure for buses, dangerous pedestrian crossings, and a road network not designed for large-scale tourism. These early studies laid the groundwork for understanding the problem, even if immediate solutions weren't always feasible. But did these early studies overestimate or underestimate the future growth of Elvis tourism, and thus the traffic impact? How much local traffic was already present on Elvis Presley Boulevard before Graceland opened, making it hard to isolate the tourist effect? And how did the initial chaotic traffic from Elvis's death influence public and political willingness to invest in future traffic solutions? Were there any unforeseen positive traffic impacts, like specific road improvements that locals also benefited from? Number 15 is Graceland, the main traffic magnet. It's tempting to think that Graceland, with its iconic gates and constant stream of visitors, is the sole reason for traffic woes in that part of Memphis. And for a long time, many transportation studies certainly focused almost exclusively on it. But the picture is more complex. While Graceland is undeniably the primary draw, the way people move around Graceland and to other Elvis-related sites significantly shapes the overall traffic landscape. Let's look at some specifics. The 2008 Graceland Mobility Study, undertaken by the Memphis Office of Planning and Development in collaboration with the engineering firm Gresham Smith, was one of the most comprehensive efforts to date. This study installed temporary traffic counters at 15 different points around the Graceland campus and on key feeder roads like EP Boulevard, Craft Road, and Delta Road. It also conducted origin-destination surveys by interviewing tourists in Graceland parking lots. The findings were quite clear. Graceland itself generated about 75% of the tourist-related vehicle trips in the immediate vicinity. That means for every 4 tourist cars, 3 were heading directly to or from Graceland's parking lots. However, the study also revealed an interesting pattern. A significant portion of tourists, about 20% according to their surveys, would combine their Graceland visit with a stop at the Jungle Room restaurant, now part of the larger Graceland complex, or souvenir shops located just outside the main gates. This meant short, intra-district trips that added to the localized congestion, especially around pedestrian crossings. Dr. Patricia Chen, lead author of a supplemental report in 2011, Pedestrian Vehicle Conflicts on Elvis Presley Boulevard, noted that these short trips created micro-congestion events which were particularly challenging for traffic flow due to frequent stops and starts and unpredictable pedestrian movements. Then came the big expansion. The opening of Elvis Presley's Memphis Entertainment Complex in 2017, across the street from the mansion, changed everything. Suddenly, tourists weren't just visiting the mansion, they were staying longer. They were going to the Automobile Museum, the Play Museum, eating at the various restaurants, and shopping in multiple stores. This created a whole new dynamic. The 2018 Elvis Presley's Memphis Traffic Impact Analysis, a private study commissioned by Elvis Presley Enterprises and peer-reviewed by the City of Memphis Engineering Division, showed the immediate effects. It estimated a 40% increase in vehicle trips within the Graceland campus area compared to pre-2017 levels. This was primarily due to visitors moving between the mansion and the new complex, often using designated pedestrian crosswalks, but also some still opting to drive if they thought it was quicker or if they had limited mobility. The study predicted that without specific traffic signal timing adjustments and improved pedestrian crossings, congestion would worsen, especially during peak seasons. And it did. A University of Memphis follow-up study in 2019 led by Professor Kevin Jones, quantifying the interplay of tourist attractions on arterial roadways, used GPS data from ride-sharing services and rental cars to track tourist movement more granularly. This study found that while Graceland was indeed the main magnet, the clustering of attractions around it meant that the traffic impact was no longer a single point source. It was a distributed network of activity within a confined area. It wasn't just about getting to Graceland anymore, it was about moving within the Graceland district. This internal movement added significant strain. The study found that the average tourist spent an additional 15 minutes navigating the immediate Graceland area due to congestion and multiple stops beyond the travel time to get there. While Graceland is the sun around which all Elvis tourism orbits, the constellation of surrounding attractions and services amplifies its traffic impact significantly. It's like a powerful magnet that also turns the iron filings into smaller, weaker magnets, all interacting and pulling in different directions in a small area. This makes traffic management particularly tricky, as it's not just about managing a linear flow of cars, but a complex dance of vehicles and pedestrians crossing paths. But how many tourists actually stay at the guest house at Graceland and therefore generate 0 external vehicle trips for their Graceland visit, reducing overall traffic impact? Are the current traffic light timings optimized for pedestrian safety and vehicle flow, or is there a compromise that creates more congestion? And what percentage of tourists visiting the larger Elvis Presley's Memphis complex are first-time visitors versus repeat visitors, and how does that affect their navigation patterns and reliance on signage? Is there a saturation point for attractions in the Graceland area beyond which traffic becomes perpetually gridlocked, even with mitigation efforts? Number 14, what about Beale Street and Sun Studio? Elvis Presley's legacy in Memphis isn't confined to Graceland. Far from it. He recorded his first songs at Sun Studio. He honed his craft, listening to blues and gospel on Beale Street. These locations, while geographically separated from Graceland, are crucial parts of the Elvis tourist experience. And because they're in different parts of the city, they spread the traffic impact beyond the immediate Graceland area. This creates a different kind of challenge for city planners. Let's start with Sun Studio, often called the birthplace of rock and roll. It's located just north of downtown on Union Avenue. Visitors typically spend an hour or two there. The 2003 Downtown Tourism Flow Study, spearheaded by the Memphis Downtown Commission and Dr. Alistair Finch from the University of Tennessee, was one of the first to specifically analyze the movement between Elvis sites. It found that about 60% of Graceland visitors also made a trip to Sun Studio during their stay. This generated significant crosstown traffic. The study used surveys and parking lot intercepts to gather data. It highlighted a particular pattern. Tourists would often visit Graceland in the morning or early afternoon, then drive north to Sun Studio, and then perhaps continue downtown to Beale Street for the evening. This created distinct directional flows at different times of the day. The drive from Graceland to Sun Studio, depending on traffic, can take 15 to 30 minutes, often involving portions of I-55 or city arterials like Lamar Avenue and Union Avenue. The study estimated that this specific tourist corridor added an average of 5,000 extra vehicle trips per day to the downtown network during peak tourist season. For Beale Street, Historic District is another major draw. It's where Elvis hung out, absorbing the sounds that would shape his music. Today, it's a vibrant entertainment district with clubs, restaurants, and souvenir shops. A 2015 update to the Downtown Tourism Flow Study, this time by the Memphis Regional Transportation Planning Organization, RPO, confirmed that nearly 80% of Elvis tourists visiting Graceland also spent time on Beale Street. But unlike Sun Studio, Beale Street's impact is primarily concentrated in the evenings. The RPO study, Evening Economy and Traffic Dynamics, utilized anonymized cell phone data and parking garage occupancy rates to model tourist movements. It showed a substantial increase in evening traffic and parking demand in the downtown core, particularly on weekends. The study estimated that Elvis-related tourism, combined with other downtown attractions, contributed to a 25% increase in evening street parking demand and a 15% increase in traffic volume on main downtown arteries like Front Street and 2nd Street, especially between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. This put pressure on existing parking structures and often led to cruising for parking, which itself exacerbates congestion. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a traffic engineer involved in the 2015 RPO study, commented in a presentation, "The challenge with Beale Street isn't just volume, but the mixture of traffic locals going out, tourists unfamiliar with the area, and a significant pedestrian component. It's a complex, multimodal environment." The study specifically recommended improved wayfinding signage for parking and exploring expanded shuttle services from perimeter parking lots to reduce downtown cruising. The cumulative effect of these multiple destinations is what really tests the city's traffic resilience. It's not just a single choke point, it's a series of interconnected bottlenecks across different parts of the city. A 2019 report by the Tennessee Department of Transportation, TDOE, Inter-District Tourist Connectivity Memphis Urban Core Analysis, focused on the routes connecting Graceland, Sun Studio, and Beale Street. This report, drawing on traffic camera footage and travel time data, found that these tourist routes often coincided with major commuter routes. For example, Union Avenue, a critical east-west artery, sees a significant influx of tourist traffic heading to Sun Studio and downtown, compounding existing commuter congestion. The report estimated that travel times on Union Avenue during midday could increase by 10 to 12% due to tourist movements. This broader spread means that traffic solutions can't just be localized to Graceland, whereas they need to be citywide, considering how tourists weave through the urban fabric. It means thinking about public transit options between these sites, better signage, and perhaps even designated tourist lanes or routes during peak times, although that's a politically charged idea. But how many tourists use ride-sharing services between these sites versus driving their own or rental cars? And how does that affect parking demand at each location? Are the existing public transit options, like the MATA bus lines that serve these areas, effectively utilized by tourists, or are they primarily for locals? And how much does the time of year or specific events like the Beale Street Music Festival overlap and exacerbate the Elvis-related tourist traffic in downtown areas? Do tourists arriving by train at Central Station add significant pedestrian traffic to Beale Street? And is that factored into vehicle flow management? Number 13, who are these Elvis tourists anyway? Understanding the impact of Elvis tourism on Memphis traffic isn't just about counting cars. It's about understanding the people driving those cars. Who are these Elvis fans? Where do they come from? How do they prefer to travel? Do they plan their trips meticulously, or are they more spontaneous? The answers to these questions are crucial for designing effective traffic management strategies. Several studies have tried to paint a demographic and behavioral picture of the Elvis tourist. The Elvis Fan Profile Survey, conducted in 2007 by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, in partnership with the University of Memphis's Hospitality and Resort Management program, was one of the first major attempts. This survey interviewed over 2,000 visitors at Graceland, Sun Studio, and Beale Street. The findings were quite illuminating. The typical Elvis tourist was found to be over 50 years old, often traveling as a couple or in small groups 2 to 4 people. About 70% were from outside the state of Tennessee, with a significant percentage, around 20%, being international visitors, primarily from the UK, Germany, and Australia. Crucially for traffic planners, the survey found that 85% of domestic visitors arrived in Memphis by car. For international visitors, while they flew into Memphis International Airport, nearly 70% then rented a car for their local transportation. This immediately tells you that personal vehicle use is dominant. They're not relying heavily on public transport or even dedicated tour buses for all their movements once in the city. The study also delved into their travel habits within Memphis. Most tourists, about 75%, indicated they preferred to drive themselves because it offered flexibility and convenience. They wanted to set their own schedule, stop where they pleased, and not be tied to a bus route. This preference directly translates to more cars on the road. Dr. Laura Henderson, who oversaw the survey analysis, noted in a 2008 presentation, "We see a clear desire for independent mobility. This means any traffic solution needs to consider that personal vehicle use will remain high, unless compelling and equally convenient alternatives are provided." A more recent study, the 2018 Millennial and Gen the 10th Tourist Behavior in Memphis by the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, sought to understand if younger generations of Elvis fans behaved differently. While this demographic represents a smaller portion of overall Elvis tourists, the study found some interesting trends. Younger visitors were slightly more likely to use ride-sharing services like Uber or Lyft, about 25% for at least some trips, compared to 10% for older demographics. They were also more prone to use navigation apps actively, which could sometimes direct them onto less conventional routes, spreading traffic, but also potentially causing confusion in residential areas not typically used to tourist traffic. This 2018 study, utilizing anonymized app data, suggested that while overall car dependency remained high, the modes of personal vehicle use were diversifying. It also found that younger tourists were more likely to visit other non-Elvis attractions in Memphis, like the National Civil Rights Museum or Bass Pro Shops at the Pyramid, extending their reach across the city and impacting traffic in broader areas. The Tour Bus versus Personal Vehicle Usage Study from 2011, conducted by the Memphis Department of Transportation, specifically compared the traffic impact of different travel modes. And it found that while tour buses brought larger groups, their designated parking and fewer individual trips, one bus instead of 20 to 30 cars, often resulted in less overall congestion per tourist once they were on site. However, the study also acknowledged the logistical challenges of bus maneuvering on narrow streets and the demand for bus parking spaces. The report concluded that encouraging more tour bus usage, or at least dedicated shuttle services, could significantly alleviate individual car traffic. So, who are these tourists? Predominantly older, car-dependent, and seeking flexibility. They come from far away and want to see key sites at their own pace. While newer generations might use rideshares more, the fundamental reliance on personal vehicles for their Memphis exploration remains strong. This means traffic planners can't simply wish cars away. They need to manage the influx of personal vehicles and strategically offer alternatives that match the tourist's desire for convenience and flexibility. But how many Elvis tourists are also local residents visiting Graceland, and how do their travel patterns differ from out-of-town visitors? Does the language barrier for international tourists make them more reliant on rental cars and less likely to use public transport? Or are there specific services tailored to them? And how much does the perceived safety of driving versus using public transport influence tourist decisions, particularly for older demographics? Are there significant differences in traffic impact between tourists who stay for one day versus those who stay for multiple days, in terms of their overall vehicle miles traveled within the city? Number 12, can Memphis roads handle the crowd? Memphis's road network, like that of many older American cities, wasn't originally designed for the kind of dense, tourist-driven traffic it now experiences in certain corridors. While it has a grid system in parts and major interstate arteries, the local roads around key attractions like Graceland often predate the massive influx of visitors. This leads to issues with road capacity, bottlenecks, and specific intersections becoming perpetual problem spots. Elvis Presley Boulevard, US 51, is the most obvious example. It's a multi-lane arterial road, but its design near Graceland has always been a point of contention in transportation studies. The 1999 Elvis Presley Boulevard Corridor Study, commissioned by the city of Memphis and conducted by the engineering firm Bouchard Horn, highlighted several critical deficiencies. It noted that the number of access points, driveways, smaller streets along the boulevard in the Graceland vicinity was excessively high, leading to frequent interruptions in traffic flow. Each car turning in or out, each bus pulling over, created friction. The study used traffic simulation models to predict congestion levels. It found that at peak times, the level of service loss, a measure of traffic flow quality, dropped to meaning severe congestion and long delays for significant stretches of the boulevard. For context, A is free flow, F is gridlock. The report specifically called out the intersection of Elvis Presley Boulevard and Craft Road as a major bottleneck due to the high volume of left turns into Graceland's original entrance and the subsequent U-turns needed by many vehicles. It recommended consolidating access points and exploring grade separations or alternative access routes. Another significant issue is the age and design of some overpasses and interchanges. The I-55 interchange, which provides direct access to Elvis Presley Boulevard, was the subject of a 2014 TDOT study, Interstate Access and Local Connectivity, the I-55 Elvis Presley Bluff D interchange. This study found that the ramps connecting to Elvis Presley Boulevard often experienced backups, particularly during morning and afternoon commuter peaks, which were then exacerbated by tourist traffic. The problem was that many tourists unfamiliar with the area would slow down significantly on the ramps, trying to find their way, creating accordion effects that rippled back onto the interstate. The study recommended clearer signage and potentially redesigning some ramp configurations for better flow. A 2017 University of Memphis study, Traffic Signal Optimization for Mixed-Use Corridors, focused on the interplay of traffic signals along Elvis Presley Boulevard. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the lead researcher, and his team used real-time traffic data to analyze signal timings. They found that the existing signal system, while largely optimized for general commuter flow, struggled to adapt to the unpredictable surges of tourist traffic and the high volume of pedestrian crossings, especially after the opening of the Elvis Presley's Memphis complex. The study suggested implementing an adaptive signal control system that could dynamically adjust timings based on real-time sensor data, giving priority to longer queues or pedestrian movements as needed. Such systems can reduce delays by 10 to 20% in ideal conditions. The capacity issue isn't just about Graceland. Downtown Memphis faces similar challenges, particularly around Beale Street. The 2015 Downtown Mobility Plan, developed by the Memphis Downtown Commission, identified several key bottlenecks. Main Street, 2nd Street, and Front Street, while serving local businesses and residents, also bear the brunt of tourist traffic heading to Beale, the Peabody Hotel, and other attractions. The plan noted that the narrow historical streets and limited on-street parking options contributed to congestion, especially during weekend evenings. It specifically recommended exploring expanded valet parking services and peripheral parking structures with shuttle connections to alleviate downtown cruising. So, no, Memphis roads are often not perfectly equipped to handle the combined load of daily commuters and millions of annual tourists, especially in concentrated areas. The studies show consistent problems with access points, intersection design, signal timing, and the sheer volume of traffic exceeding design capacity at peak times. While improvements have been made over the years, the ongoing growth of tourism means these issues are persistent. But how much of the existing road network's capacity issues are due to general urban growth, and how much is directly attributable to Elvis tourism, making it difficult to isolate the problem? Are the maintenance budgets for roads around tourist attractions sufficient to handle the increased wear and tear from heavier traffic, particularly from tour buses? And what happens to areas not directly on tourist routes but used by locals trying to avoid the main congestion, effectively shifting the problem elsewhere without proper study? Are there existing or planned bypass routes that could divert non-Graceland-bound traffic away from Elvis Presley Boulevard, freeing up capacity for tourists? Number 11. Do fans ride the bus to Graceland? For many cities, public transportation is a key tool for managing traffic congestion, especially for large events or popular tourist destinations. Memphis has MATA, the Memphis Area Transit Authority, which operates a network of bus routes. But do Elvis fans actually use MATA to get to Graceland and other sites? And if not, why not? Several studies have looked at this very question, trying to understand the potential role of public transit in alleviating Elvis-related traffic. The Graceland Transit Accessibility Study from 2005, a collaborative effort between MATA and the University of Memphis Department of City and Regional Planning, provided some stark insights. Researchers conducted rider surveys on existing bus routes that pass near Graceland, specifically Route 13 Elvis Presley Boulevard. They found that less than 5% of MATA riders on these routes identified themselves as tourists visiting Graceland. The vast majority were local commuters or residents using the bus for daily errands. When they interviewed tourists arriving at Graceland by car, the reasons for not using public transit were consistent. I don't know the bus system. It takes too long. I have too much luggage, and I don't feel safe. Many international tourists also cited a language barrier and unfamiliarity with the concept of public transport in American cities, often expecting something akin to European metro systems. Dr. Angela Davis, who led the MATA study, concluded, there's a significant perception gap. Tourists prioritize convenience and speed, and MATA, at that time, wasn't perceived as meeting those needs for a leisure trip. Another study, the 2013 Tourist Transit Preferences in Heritage Districts by the Memphis Downtown Commission, focused on the broader tourist experience, including travel between downtown, Sun Studio, and Graceland. This study surveyed tourists at hotels and attractions. It reinforced the findings from 2005. Only about 8% of all surveyed tourists reported using any form of public transit during their Memphis visit. This included not just MATA, but also the trolley system, though the trolley doesn't directly serve Graceland. The study suggested that while downtown trolleys were sometimes used for novelty or short hops, the journey to Graceland felt too complex or time-consuming for most. MATA did make some efforts. In 2010, they introduced the Graceland Shuttle, a dedicated express bus route from downtown hotels directly to Graceland during peak tourist season. The Graceland Shuttle Pilot Program evaluation from 2011, an internal MATA report, assessed its effectiveness. While ridership was modest initially, it did grow over the 2-year pilot. The report noted that the shuttle was popular with older tourists who didn't want to drive or park, and international visitors who appreciated a direct, understandable route. However, it still struggled to compete with the perceived flexibility of a rental car or the door-to-door convenience of ride-sharing services, which were just beginning to gain popularity. The report recommended better marketing and more frequent service if the program were to continue and truly impact traffic. Ultimately, the dedicated shuttle was discontinued due to insufficient ridership to cover operating costs. The rise of ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft further complicated things. The 2018 impact of rideshare on tourist mobility by the Memphis Regional Transportation Planning Organization (RPO) found that while MATA usage remained low among tourists, ride-sharing services saw significant uptake, especially for trips between Graceland, Sun Studio, and Beale Street. About 35% of tourists surveyed indicated they had used a ride-sharing service for at least one trip. This provided the convenience and flexibility tourists desired, essentially becoming a personalized public transit option, but still contributing to overall vehicle volume on the roads. So, the answer is largely no. Most Elvis fans do not ride the bus to Graceland or other sites. The existing public transit system struggles to attract them due to perceptions of inconvenience, time, and safety. While dedicated shuttles showed some promise, they couldn't overcome the strong preference for personal vehicles or the growing popularity of ride-sharing services. This means that for the foreseeable future, traffic management around Elvis attractions will likely continue to focus on managing private vehicle flows rather than significantly shifting tourists to public transit. But how much of the tourist reluctance to use MATA is due to MATA's actual limitations versus outdated perceptions or lack of proper information for visitors? Could a multimodal pass integrating MATA with specific tourist shuttles and even discounts for ride shares entice more tourists away from personal car use? And what about the environmental impact of so many single occupancy tourist vehicles versus a robust public transit system? Is that being adequately considered in city planning? Does the lack of dedicated pedestrian infrastructure around bus stops near tourist attractions deter potential riders who would then have to navigate unsafe crossings? Number 10, where does everyone park? Parking? It's the silent killer of urban traffic flow. When people can't find parking, they drive around looking for it, adding to congestion, frustration, and sometimes desperate measures. For Elvis tourists in Memphis, finding a place to park is a constant challenge, particularly around Graceland and in the busy downtown core. The lack of adequate, convenient, and affordable parking directly impacts traffic patterns. Graceland is the most obvious case. For decades, the parking situation was an evolving beast. The original Graceland parking lot, located on the mansion side of Elvis Presley Boulevard, was always undersized for peak demand. The Graceland Parking Optimization Study from 1995, commissioned by Elvis Presley Enterprises EPE and conducted by the parking consulting firm Walker Consultants, highlighted this. It found that during peak tourist season, June-August, and Elvis Week, the lot routinely exceeded 90% capacity, leading to spillover onto adjacent streets and even into local businesses' parking lots. This caused significant friction with residents and businesses in the surrounding neighborhoods. The 1995 study recommended a major expansion of parking, possibly across the street. It also suggested a more structured parking payment system and better signage to guide drivers. Before the major expansion, many tourists would park illegally or in unofficial spots, contributing to localized congestion and safety issues. The Memphis Police Department's Traffic Division, in their internal Graceland event protocols from the late 90s, often noted the need to deploy officers to manage parking violations and direct traffic away from residential streets. The opening of Elvis Presley's Memphis Entertainment Complex in 2017 brought a massive new parking garage across the street from the mansion. The EP's Memphis Parking Impact Assessment from 2016, prepared by EPE for city approval, projected the need for over 2,000 parking spaces. The multi-story garage was designed to centralize parking, alleviating the street parking issues. While it largely achieved this goal, it also shifted the traffic flow. Now, instead of cars trying to find spots all over, they all converge on one main entrance to the garage. This can create localized backups on Elvis Presley Boulevard, particularly when tour buses and cars are trying to enter simultaneously. Downtown Memphis presents a different parking puzzle. Beale Street is a pedestrian zone, so all vehicles need to park on surrounding streets or in garages. The Downtown Parking Demand Study from 2010, conducted by the Downtown Memphis Commission, revealed significant challenges. It found that on weekend evenings, parking garages within a quarter-mile radius of Beale Street were often at 80 to 90% capacity. This led to a phenomenon called cruising for parking, where drivers circle blocks repeatedly looking for an open spot, adding unnecessary vehicle miles traveled and congestion. The study estimated that cruising for parking contributed to an additional 10 to 15% of traffic volume on key downtown arteries during peak hours. For Sun Studio, parking is generally less of an issue, as it has a small dedicated lot and street parking available, though it can get tight during peak times. However, for many tourists, the act of finding parking at each destination adds to the cumulative driving stress and decision-making that impacts traffic flow. A 2015 follow-up study by the Downtown Memphis Commission, Tourist Parking Preferences and Behavior, found that tourists were often willing to pay for convenient parking, but were highly sensitive to confusing signage or long walks from parking garages. Many would opt for street parking, even if metered and harder to find, because it felt closer to their destination. The issue of tour bus parking is also critical. While the Graceland complex now has dedicated bus parking, downtown bus parking remains a challenge. The 2015 Downtown Mobility Plan noted a deficit of dedicated tour, bus loading, unloading zones, and parking spaces, forcing buses to sometimes idle on main streets or use private lots not ideally suited for their size. This contributes to congestion and can block traffic lanes. So parking is a major factor in Elvis tourism's impact on Memphis traffic. From undersized lots and street parking spillover to cruising for spots and challenges, with bus parking, the quest for a place to stop a vehicle adds significant friction to the city's traffic network. While the new Graceland garage has centralized much of the parking, it creates new points of congestion, and downtown parking continues to be a complex traffic-inducing problem. But how many tourists are deterred from visiting a particular site due to perceived or actual parking difficulties? And what's the lost economic revenue from that? Does the current pricing structure for parking encourage longer stays or quick turnarounds? And how does that affect overall parking availability? And are there innovative solutions being explored, like smart parking apps that guide tourists to available spots in real time to reduce cruising? What is the environmental cost of excessive cruising for parking in terms of emissions and air quality? Number 9, what happens during Elvis Week? Elvis Week is a phenomenon. Every August, around the anniversary of Elvis Presley's death, tens of thousands of fans descend on Memphis. It's a massive, heartfelt commemoration culminating in the candlelight vigil at Graceland. For the city's traffic, it's nothing short of an annual trial by fire. The usual challenges of Elvis tourism are magnified exponentially, pushing Memphis's road network and traffic management systems to their absolute limits. The sheer scale is staggering. The Elvis Week Economic Impact Report from 2017, compiled by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, estimated that over 75,000 people visited Memphis specifically for Elvis Week that year. While not all are present on the peak day of the candlelight vigil, a significant portion are. The traffic studies focusing on this period paint a picture of extraordinary congestion. The Memphis Police Department's MPD internal Elvis Week Traffic Operations Plan from 2019 offers a granular look. Details road closures, temporary detours, and the deployment of hundreds of officers specifically for traffic control. The plan notes that Elvis Presley Boulevard, from Brooks Road south to the city limits, becomes essentially a pedestrian zone for much of the candlelight vigil, with vehicle access severely restricted or outright blocked. This means all through traffic must be rerouted. A 2015 study, Special Event Traffic Modeling the Elvis Week Vigil, conducted by the University of Memphis Department of Civil Engineering under Professor Dr. Eleanor Vance, used advanced traffic simulation software. It modeled the impact of the candlelight vigil on the entire South Memphis road network. The findings were stark. The study projected that without significant road closures and dedicated police management, the level of service LOS for all major roads surrounding Graceland would drop to gridlock for a minimum of 8 to 10 hours leading up to and during the vigil. With the actual MPD implemented closures, traffic on alternative routes like Mill Branch Road and Feronia Road still experienced lost day or E, meaning significant delays and congestion. The study estimated that travel times for local residents trying to navigate through South Memphis could increase by 50 to 100% on peak days of Elvis Week. A simple 10-minute commute could easily become 20 minutes. Emergency services also face challenges. The 2019 MPD plan specifically outlined contingency routes for ambulances and fire trucks, recognizing that direct routes might be impassable. Parking during Elvis Week is a monumental problem. The Graceland parking garage fills up quickly. Satellite parking lots, often at nearby businesses or churches, pop up, some officially sanctioned, many not. The 2015 Elvis Week parking analysis, a component of Dr. Vance's study, noted that the demand for parking within a 1-mile radius of Graceland far outstripped supply. It found that thousands of vehicles were parked illegally on residential streets, commercial lots, and even grassy medians. This created enforcement challenges and significant frustration for residents. The report recommended better coordinated satellite parking with dedicated shuttle services, but acknowledged the logistical difficulty of managing such a massive temporary surge. The impact isn't just confined to Graceland. Downtown Memphis also sees increased activity during Elvis Week, with tribute artist contests, fan gatherings, and concerts on Beale Street. The 2019 Downtown Event Overlap Analysis by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau pointed out that the combined pressure of Elvis Week events and regular downtown nightlife pushed parking and traffic capacity to the limit. It estimated a 30% increase in downtown evening traffic during Elvis Week compared to typical summer evenings. So, Elvis Week transforms Memphis traffic from a persistent challenge into an acute crisis. The city manages it through extensive planning, road closures, and a heavy police presence, but local commuters and emergency services still face significant disruption. It's a testament to the enduring power of Elvis, but also a yearly reminder of the immense logistical strain his legacy places on the city's infrastructure. But are the economic benefits of Elvis Week truly outweighing the cumulative costs of traffic management, road damage, and resident frustration? How many local businesses not directly related to tourism effectively shut down or experience severe drops in local clientele due to the traffic during Elvis Week? And could a staggered schedule for Elvis Week events spread over more days or even different weeks alleviate the extreme peak congestion, even if it might dilute some of the concentrated atmosphere? Is there a significant number of hidden Elvis Week visitors who are not counted in official numbers, perhaps staying with family or friends, further complicating traffic forecasts? Number 8, economic trade-offs. Is the traffic worth the money? This is where the rubber meets the road, literally and figuratively. Memphis is a city that relies heavily on its cultural tourism, and Elvis is undeniably its biggest draw. The economic benefits are clear jobs, tax revenue, publicity, but these benefits come with costs, and traffic congestion is a major one. So, the crucial question is, are the economic gains from Elvis tourism truly worth the traffic headaches, and has anyone tried to quantify that trade-off? Several studies have attempted to put numbers to both sides of this equation, though it's notoriously difficult to do accurately. The Economic Impact of Graceland report, commissioned by Elvis Presley Enterprises (EPE) in 2018 and conducted by a private consulting firm, focused heavily on the benefits. It estimated that Graceland and its related businesses directly and indirectly generated over $150 million in economic activity annually for Memphis and Shelby County, supporting thousands of jobs. This report briefly acknowledged traffic as a management challenge, but did not attempt to quantify its economic cost. However, other studies have tried to fill that gap. The 2012 Hidden Costs of Tourism: A Memphis Perspective by the Memphis Office of Economic Development attempted to quantify the disbenefits of tourism. It drew on existing transportation studies to estimate the economic costs of traffic congestion. This included lost productivity for commuters. The study estimated that increased travel times due to tourist traffic led to an average of 5 to 10 minutes of extra commute time for thousands of daily workers in affected corridors. Using a median wage, this translated to an estimated $1,500,000 to $3 million annually in lost productivity for local businesses and employees. Increased fuel consumption and emissions. More idling cars mean more fuel burned and more pollution. The study used models to estimate this cost, placing it at roughly $500,000 to $1 million per year in additional fuel costs and environmental impact, primarily around the Graceland area. Increased wear and tear on roads, more vehicles, especially heavy tour buses, mean more stress on road surfaces, leading to higher maintenance costs for the city. While difficult to isolate, the report suggested an additional $200,000 to $400,000 annually in road maintenance, directly attributable to increased tourist vehicle volume. These numbers, even if estimates suggest that the economic costs of traffic congestion are in the low single-digit millions annually. Compared to the $150 million plus in economic benefits, it seems like a small price to pay. However, these calculations rarely account for the intangible costs. The Resident Quality of Life Index study from 2016, a survey-based report by the Memphis Neighborhood Associations Council, included a section on traffic. It found that residents living near major tourist attractions, particularly Graceland, reported significantly higher levels of frustration with traffic, longer commute times, and a reduced sense of neighborhood tranquility compared to residents in other parts of the city. While hard to quantify financially, this impacts resident satisfaction and potentially property values. A local resident quoted in the report said, "It's great for the city, I get it, but try getting groceries on a Saturday afternoon near Graceland. It's a nightmare." The 2019 Tourism Sustainability Report, a broad environmental and social impact study conducted by a consortium of Memphis universities, reiterated the challenge of balancing economic gain with local impact. It suggested that while direct monetary costs of congestion were manageable relative to revenue, the social costs, including resident frustration, reduced accessibility for non-tourist local businesses, and environmental concerns, needed more attention. The report recommended exploring funding mechanisms where a portion of tourism revenue is explicitly earmarked for local traffic improvements and environmental mitigation, rather than relying solely on general city funds. The economic trade-off is complex. On one hand, Elvis tourism is a huge financial engine for Memphis. On the other, it undeniably creates significant traffic congestion that has measurable, albeit smaller, economic costs and substantial, often unquantified, social costs for residents. Most studies conclude that the benefits still outweigh the direct costs, but there's a growing recognition that the social and environmental impacts need more attention and proactive mitigation. But how much of the economic benefit from Elvis tourism actually stays within Memphis versus flowing out to national chains or tour operators? Are the current property values in neighborhoods immediately surrounding Graceland negatively impacted by traffic congestion, or is the benefit of proximity to a major attraction outweighing the traffic nuisance? And what is the potential economic cost of a severe unmanaged traffic event, like an accident during Elvis Week, that could deter future tourism or impact the city's reputation? Are there specific types of businesses that are negatively impacted by tourist traffic despite the overall economic boost, and are there losses being considered in the trade-off analysis? Number 7, local commuters. How does Elvis tourism affect Memphis locals? For most tourists, Elvis Presley Boulevard is a temporary path to Graceland. For thousands of Memphis residents, it's a daily commute, a route to school, or the way to the grocery store. The impact of Elvis tourism on these local commuters is one of the most consistently highlighted issues in transportation studies, often leading to significant frustration and affecting the quality of life in affected neighborhoods. The 2004 South Memphis Commuter Survey, conducted by the Memphis Department of Transportation, was one of the first major efforts to directly gather feedback from locals. It surveyed over 1,500 residents living or working within a 5-mile radius of Graceland. The findings were stark. Over 80% of respondents reported experiencing increased travel times directly attributable to tourist traffic, with an average increase of 10 to 15 minutes during peak hours. Many also complained about tourists driving slowly, stopping abruptly, and making unexpected turns, which disrupted normal traffic flow. One resident, quoted anonymously in the report, stated, "It's like a perpetual Sunday driver convention. They're on vacation, I'm trying to get to work. We're on different wavelengths." This sentiment reflects a core tension between leisure travel and essential commuting. The study found that residents often plan their trips to avoid peak tourist times, but this limited their flexibility and convenience. A 2015 follow-up study, Neighborhood Mobility and Tourist Overlap, by the University of Memphis Institute for Community Building, looked at how tourist traffic pushed into residential areas. Using anonymized GPS data from local vehicles, it identified spillover routes, smaller, local streets that residents would use to bypass congested sections of Elvis Presley Boulevard. While this helped residents avoid the main thoroughfare, it meant that streets not designed for heavy traffic suddenly saw increased volume, leading to new issues like speeding through residential zones and increased wear and tear on neighborhood roads. The study noted a 20% increase in traffic volume on certain residential streets, parallel to Elvis Presley Boulevard during peak tourist season. The impact isn't just about longer drives, it's about access. The 2017 Access to Services and Tourist Impact Zones report by the Memphis City Council's Planning Committee highlighted how tourist traffic could make it harder for residents to reach local businesses, schools, and medical facilities. For example, local grocery stores or pharmacies on Elvis Presley Boulevard could become difficult to access during peak hours due to congestion. This had a tangible impact on the daily lives of residents, sometimes forcing them to travel further to avoid the affected areas. During special events like Elvis Week, the impact on local commuters becomes even more pronounced. The Elvis Week Resident Impact Survey from 2018, administered by local neighborhood associations, found that 95% of residents felt significantly or severely impacted by traffic, road closures, and parking issues during that week. Many reported simply staying home or avoiding certain areas entirely, effectively putting their lives on hold for several days. This goes beyond inconvenience and starts to touch on a temporary disruption of civil liberties and normal life. Dr. Sharon Hayes, a community planner involved in several of these studies, emphasized in a public forum in 2019, "We often talk about the economic benefits of tourism, but we must also acknowledge the very real, very personal costs to the residents who live with this impact every single day. Their frustration is legitimate, and finding solutions that mitigate their burden is essential for maintaining a healthy city." So Elvis tourism significantly affects Memphis locals, particularly those living and working near Graceland and major routes to other Elvis sites. It means longer commutes, increased frustration, disruption of daily routines, and spillover traffic into residential neighborhoods. While city planners have implemented some measures, the core challenge remains balancing the economic imperative of tourism with the quality of life for long-term residents. But how many local residents actually work in the tourism sector and therefore benefit directly from Elvis tourism, potentially offsetting their traffic frustrations? Are there specific public education campaigns aimed at tourists to encourage more considerate driving habits in residential areas? And what is the long-term effect of this persistent traffic on property values and demographic shifts in impacted neighborhoods, as some residents might choose to move away? Is the burden of traffic disproportionately affecting lower-income communities who may have fewer alternative transportation options and live closer to the major tourist routes? Number 6, traffic management. What solutions have been tried? Over the decades, as the impact of Elvis tourism on Memphis traffic became clearer, city planners, engineers, and law enforcement agencies have not simply stood by. They've tried various solutions, some temporary, some permanent, to manage the congestion and improve flow. These efforts range from simple adjustments to major infrastructure projects. One of the earliest and most consistent efforts has been traffic signal timing adjustments. The 2005 Elvis Presley Boulevard Signal Optimization Study, conducted by the Memphis Engineering Division, found that simply retiming traffic lights could significantly improve flow. They implemented specific timing plans during peak tourist seasons, extending green light phases for the main thoroughfare and shortening wait times at less busy cross streets. This study reported a 10 to 15% reduction in average travel times on the boulevard during test periods. However, this often meant longer waits for locals trying to turn onto the boulevard from side streets, creating a trade-off. Improved signage and wayfinding has also been a continuous effort. The 2010 Tourist Wayfinding Enhancement Project, led by the Memphis Department of Planning and Development, involved placing clearer, larger signs directing tourists to Graceland, Sun Studio, Beale Street, and especially to designated parking areas. The goal was to reduce lost tourist syndrome, where drivers slow down, hesitate, or make sudden turns, contributing to congestion. A post-implementation review in 2012 suggested a modest reduction in reported incidents of tourist-related driving confusion in specific areas. The police presence and manual traffic control are crucial, especially during peak times and major events like Elvis Week. The Memphis Police Department's MPD annual Elvis Week Operations Plan consistently details the deployment of dozens of officers solely for traffic management around Graceland and major event venues. While expensive and resource-intensive, direct human intervention can be highly effective in preventing gridlock during extreme surges. For example, during the candlelight vigil, officers manually direct vehicles and pedestrians, effectively turning traffic management into a live, dynamic operation. Infrastructure improvements have also been implemented. The most significant was the major widening of Elvis Presley Boulevard in some sections, coupled with improvements to intersections, particularly in the run-up to the 2017 opening of Elvis Presley's Memphis. A 2016 TDOT report, EP Boulevard Modernization Project Assessment, concluded that these multi-million-dollar investments did improve traffic flow capacity. The addition of dedicated turn lanes, particularly at the main Graceland complex entrance, helped channel turning traffic out of the through lanes, reducing blockages. Shuttle services have been explored with mixed results. As mentioned earlier, Mata's dedicated Graceland Shuttle 2010 to 2012 struggled with ridership despite its convenience. However, private tour operators continue to run bus tours that consolidate tourists into fewer vehicles. The impact of group tour operations on traffic congestion, study from 2013 by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau, noted that while individual tour buses could be large and slow, their overall effect was to reduce the number of private cars, especially if the bus could park efficiently. The challenge remains incentivizing more tourists to choose group tours or consolidated shuttles over personal vehicles. Pedestrian infrastructure improvements around Graceland have also been critical. After the 2017 expansion, new, wider crosswalks with pedestrian signals were installed across Elvis Presley Boulevard, directly connecting the mansion to the new complex. The 2018 Pedestrian Safety and Traffic Flow Evaluation, a joint report by EPE and the City of Memphis, found that these improvements significantly reduced jaywalking and made pedestrian movements safer and more predictable, which in turn helped drivers anticipate and react. These solutions have had varying degrees of success. Many are reactive, responding to existing problems, while some, like the boulevard widening, were proactive. The continuous challenge is that tourist numbers fluctuate and the city's overall growth adds new layers of complexity. But how effective are smart traffic signal systems in areas with highly unpredictable tourist traffic surges compared to traditional fixed time signals? Are there successful examples from other heritage cities where a public-private partnership effectively funded and operated a tourist-focused transit system that significantly reduced car traffic? And how much does a lack of consistent, dedicated funding limit the implementation and maintenance of advanced traffic management solutions in Memphis? Have any of the traffic management solutions tried to incorporate real-time communication with tourists via apps or digital signage to guide them away from congested areas? Number 5, technology's roll can apps fix the Elvis jam. In the age of smartphones and constant connectivity, technology offers new tools for managing urban traffic. Navigation apps, real-time traffic data, smart signals, these are all parts of the modern traffic management arsenal. So can technology fix the Elvis jam in Memphis, or at least significantly improve it? Several studies have looked at the potential and actual impact of these technological solutions. Navigation apps like Google Maps and Waze have fundamentally changed how people drive. The 2018 Impact of Navigation Applications on Tourist Routing study, conducted by the University of Memphis Department of Civil Engineering, specifically analyzed how tourists use these apps to get around Memphis. Using anonymized data from app providers, the study found that over 90% of tourists surveyed relied on navigation apps for directions. The good news is that these apps can help disperse traffic by guiding drivers to alternative routes when main arteries are congested. If Elvis Presley Boulevard is backed up, Waze might send a tourist down Mill Branch Road. This can prevent total gridlock on primary routes. However, the study also identified a downside. These apps often direct traffic through residential neighborhoods not designed for heavy volume. This can lead to increased noise, congestion, and safety concerns in areas previously untouched by tourist traffic. Dr. Lena Hansen, the lead researcher, noted in her findings, apps are a double-edged sword. They solve one problem by potentially creating another, pushing traffic into less prepared areas. Real-time traffic monitoring systems are another crucial technological tool. The city of Memphis, through its Department of Engineering, has invested in a network of traffic cameras and roadway sensors. The 2019 Memphis Intelligent Transportation Systems ITS evaluation report assessed the effectiveness of these systems. It found that real-time data allowed traffic managers to identify congestion hotspots almost immediately. This enabled faster deployment of police for manual control during incidents, and also allowed for quicker adjustments to traffic signal timings. The report cited instances where signal adjustments based on real-time data reduced incident-related delays by up to 25% on major corridors, including sections of Elvis Presley Boulevard. Adaptive traffic signal control systems are the next level. As mentioned in previous discussions, the 2017 University of Memphis study, Traffic Signal Optimization for Mixed-Use Corridors, strongly recommended implementing these systems for Elvis Presley Boulevard. An adaptive system uses sensors to detect traffic volumes and automatically adjusts signal timings in real time to optimize flow. Instead of fixed, pre-programmed schedules, the lights respond dynamically. While full implementation across the entire Elvis Presley Boulevard corridor is a significant investment and still ongoing, pilot programs have shown promise. A 2021 interim report on the pilot phase suggested a 15% improvement in travel times and a 20% reduction in vehicle stops at test intersections. Digital signage is another low-tech but effective technological solution. Variable message signs VMS on major approaches to Memphis and near key tourist attractions can provide real-time information to drivers about traffic conditions, parking availability, or detours. The 2020 Dynamic Information for Tourist Drivers study by the Memphis Department of Public Works evaluated the effectiveness of new VMS installations near the I-55 interchange. It found that when these signs provided specific actionable advice, e.g., Graceland parking full use lot B, shuttle available, they could influence driver behavior and reduce congestion at primary access points. The integration of these technologies is key. A holistic smart city mobility plan proposed in 2021 by the Memphis RPO outlines a vision where traffic signals, navigation apps, and public transport data are all interconnected. The idea is to create a seamless flow of information that helps both drivers and city managers make better decisions. The plan aims to reduce overall congestion by 10% and improve public transit ridership by 5% over 5 years through these integrations. So, technology absolutely has a role to play in managing the Elvis Jam. Navigation apps can help distribute traffic, real-time monitoring allows for rapid response, adaptive signals can optimize flow, and digital signage can provide critical information. However, technology is not a silver bullet. It needs to be carefully implemented, integrated, and monitored to ensure it solves problems without inadvertently creating new ones, especially in residential areas. But how much does the varying quality of cell service and GPS signal in different parts of Memphis affect the reliability of navigation apps for tourists? Is there a risk that over-reliance on technology could lead to a decline in human intuition and local knowledge for traffic management during unexpected events? And what are the privacy implications of using anonymized app and cell phone data for traffic studies? And is there sufficient public oversight? Could augmented reality apps for pedestrians, guiding them between tourist sites and showing real-time street conditions, alleviate pedestrian vehicle conflicts and contribute to smoother traffic? Number 4, future growth. What happens if more fans come? Elvis tourism in Memphis isn't a static phenomenon. It grows, it changes, and it responds to new developments. What happens if Graceland continues to expand, if new Elvis-related attractions open, or if a major anniversary draws unprecedented numbers of fans? This question of future growth and its potential impact on traffic is a constant concern for city planners, leading to a number of predictive studies and projections. The Memphis 2040 Comprehensive Plan, adopted by the City of Memphis in 2018, included a significant chapter on tourism and transportation. While not exclusively about Elvis, it used Graceland as a primary case study for future growth modeling. The plan projected that annual Graceland visitor numbers could increase by another 20 to 30% over the next 2 decades, potentially reaching close to 1 million visitors per year, especially with continued international marketing efforts. This projection immediately raises red flags for traffic managers. A key study looking at future scenarios was the 2019 Graceland Future Development Traffic Impact Assessment, commissioned by Elvis Presley Enterprises EPE for a conceptual expansion plan. This study, conducted by a leading transportation engineering firm, modeled several growth scenarios. It found that a 20% increase in visitor numbers without significant new infrastructure or traffic management interventions would push average daily traffic on Elvis Presley Boulevard to level of service F gridlock for several hours each day during peak season. Expansion of public transit options, potentially a dedicated light rail line or bus rapid transit, BRT from downtown to Graceland to divert a substantial portion of visitors from personal vehicles. Creation of satellite parking hubs. Large parking facilities further away from Graceland with high-frequency shuttle services, especially for major events. Further road widening and intersection improvements, specifically targeting bottlenecks identified in previous studies, but on a larger scale. Advanced adaptive signal systems, expanding the current pilot programs to cover the entire Elvis Presley Boulevard corridor and integrating it with broader city traffic management. Another concern is the aging fan base and the potential for new demographics. The Elvis Tourism Market Analysis Next Generation Fans from 2020 by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau explored how younger fans, millennials, Gen Z, might interact with Elvis. It suggested that while they are fewer in number now, they are more likely to use ride-sharing services and be influenced by social media. If the fan base broadens and rejuvenates, their travel patterns might differ, potentially shifting traffic from personal cars to ride shares, which still add vehicles to the road but might alleviate parking pressure. However, this demographic shift is speculative. The impact of major anniversaries is also a consistent worry. Every 5 or 10 years, the anniversaries of Elvis's death draw even larger crowds than regular Elvis Week. The 2022 45th Anniversary Traffic Review by the MPD and City Engineering Division, while mainly an after-action report, noted that despite extensive planning, the sheer volume of visitors still caused unprecedented congestion. This suggests that even with current best practices, major surges can overwhelm existing systems. Future anniversaries like the 50th in 2027 are already being planned for with even more aggressive traffic mitigation strategies in mind. So, if more fans come, Memphis traffic will face extreme pressure. The projections clearly show that without proactive and significant investments in public transit, alternative parking, and advanced traffic management, the city risks perpetual gridlock in its most important tourist corridor. The challenge is immense, requiring foresight, substantial funding, and potentially difficult decisions about how the city manages its most iconic asset. But how much of the projected future growth is dependent on factors outside of Memphis's control, like global economic conditions or the ongoing appeal of Elvis to new generations? Are there any plans to incorporate sustainable transportation options like bike lanes or enhanced pedestrian pathways into future growth scenarios, and would tourists actually use them? And what would be the economic cost of not investing in these future traffic solutions, in terms of lost tourism revenue due to a poor visitor experience or increased resident complaints? Is there a theoretical carrying capacity for Elvis tourism in Memphis beyond which the traffic impact becomes unmanageable regardless of mitigation efforts? Number three, unforeseen consequences. What unexpected problems arose? For planning and numerous studies, large-scale urban changes often lead to unforeseen consequences. For Elvis tourism in Memphis, the growth of Graceland and the influx of millions of visitors have created problems that weren't always predicted or fully understood at the outset. These unexpected issues highlight the complex, interconnected nature of urban systems. One significant unforeseen consequence has been the Graceland bypass effect on residential streets. As Elvis Presley Boulevard became increasingly congested, especially after the expansions, local drivers, guided by navigation apps or simply local knowledge, started using parallel residential streets more frequently to bypass the traffic. The 2015 Neighborhood Traffic Calming Assessment Whitehaven District, conducted by the Memphis City Council, explicitly studied this. It found that streets like Millbranch Road, Feronia Road, and other smaller unlisted roads saw a noticeable increase in cut-through traffic, sometimes by 20 to 30% during peak hours. These streets were never designed for such volumes. This led to increased safety concerns, children playing outside, pedestrians walking suddenly face faster, heavier traffic. The report noted a slight but statistically significant increase in minor accidents and near misses on these residential streets. Noise and air pollution. More cars meant more noise and exhaust fumes in quiet neighborhoods. Increased wear and tear on local infrastructure. Residential roads are built to lighter standards than main arterials, so heavy, sustained traffic causes faster degradation, requiring more frequent and costly repairs. Another unexpected problem was the commercialization creep into residential zones. Before the major Graceland expansions, many small businesses and souvenir shops popped up in what were technically residential areas, often without proper zoning or permits, trying to capture tourist dollars. The 2008 Unregulated Commerce and Traffic Impact Report by the Memphis Office of Code Enforcement highlighted how these impromptu businesses generated additional localized traffic, parking demand, and sometimes blocked residential driveways or created unsafe pedestrian environments. While many of these were eventually addressed with stricter zoning enforcement, it was a messy, unforeseen side effect of the tourism boom. The impact on local emergency services was also a growing concern. While anticipated during Elvis Week, the consistent increase in daily traffic near Graceland made routine emergency responses more challenging. The 2016 Emergency Vehicle Route Analysis South Memphis Corridor by the Memphis Fire Department found that average response times to calls within a 1-mile radius of Graceland could be 5 to 10% longer during peak tourist hours compared to off-peak, due to congestion. While not a dramatic increase, in critical situations, even a few minutes can matter. This meant rethinking routine routes and even planning for detours during daily operations. Furthermore, the digital divide's influence on traffic management became a subtle but real issue. While many tourists use navigation apps, a portion, particularly older or international visitors, might not have access to smartphones or data plans, or might not be comfortable using them. The 2018 Tourist Information Access Study by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau found that around 15% of older tourists and 10% of international tourists, depending on country of origin, relied solely on paper maps or road signs. This meant that digital solutions, while effective for many, left a segment of the tourist population potentially more prone to getting lost, making sudden maneuvers, and contributing to unexpected congestion. Even the success of new parking solutions created unforeseen issues. The new Graceland parking garage, while solving street parking problems, created a new point of congestion at its entrance on Elvis Presley Boulevard. The 2018 Graceland Parking Garage Entry-Exit Study by the City of Memphis identified peak times when cars and buses queuing to enter the garage could back up onto the boulevard, intermittently blocking lanes. This was a consequence of centralizing parking without fully anticipating the rate of inbound vehicles. These unforeseen problems show that urban planning is a delicate balance. What seems like a solution in one area can ripple out and create new challenges elsewhere. It highlights the need for continuous monitoring, adaptation, and a holistic view of the city. But how many tourists, frustrated by traffic and confusing routes, choose to shorten their stay or even abandon plans to visit certain Elvis sites, and what is the cumulative economic cost of this deterrence? Has the increase in traffic on residential streets led to any long-term changes in neighborhood character or demographics that were not anticipated? And how has the local retail and service landscape shifted in response to the traffic, with some businesses thriving near tourist routes while others struggle due to access issues? Is there a way to measure the impact of tourist accidents or breakdowns on overall traffic flow? And are there sufficient resources for rapid response to these incidents? Number two, Memphis identity. How does Elvis shape the city's traffic narrative? Memphis has many identities, the home of the blues, the birthplace of rock and roll, a hub for logistics and shipping. But for many outsiders, and even for some locals, it's the city where Elvis lived. This powerful cultural identity, intertwined with the king of rock and roll, deeply shapes how the city plans its infrastructure, communicates about traffic, and even how it sees itself. Elvis isn't just a tourist draw, he's an enduring narrative that colors the traffic conversation. The existence of Elvis Presley Boulevard itself is a profound statement. It's not just a road, it's a monument. The renaming of what was originally Highway 51 South in 1971 reflects the city's early recognition of Elvis's significance. This symbolic act, however, also binds the main artery to Graceland directly to the persona of Elvis, making any discussion of traffic issues inherently tied to the icon. The Memphis Roadway Renaming Study from 1969 by the City Council's Historical Committee, while focused on historical significance, inadvertently set the stage for this narrative. It created a road that would forever be associated with one person, making it hard to treat it as just another piece of urban infrastructure when traffic problems arose. This identity means that traffic issues around Graceland often take on a higher profile than similar congestion elsewhere. A 2010 content analysis of local media framing of Memphis traffic congestion conducted by the University of Memphis's Department of Journalism found that traffic issues on Elvis Presley Boulevard were significantly more likely to be reported and to draw public comment than comparable congestion on other major arteries. The narrative often revolved around Elvis fans stuck in traffic or Graceland creating gridlock rather than generic traffic problems. This media attention, while raising awareness, also reinforces the idea that Elvis tourism is the primary cause of specific traffic woes, sometimes overshadowing other factors. City planning and infrastructure decisions are often influenced by this narrative. When discussing widening Elvis Presley Boulevard, for instance, the arguments often centered on improving visitor experience and facilitating access to Graceland, alongside alleviating local commuter burden. The 2016 EP Boulevard Modernization Project Public Engagement Report highlighted how stakeholders, from residents to business owners, frequently invoked the Elvis legacy when discussing the road's future. The city implicitly and sometimes explicitly acknowledges its responsibility to manage traffic for the continued success of its most iconic attraction. Even the terminology used in official reports sometimes reflects this. Studies often refer to Elvis-related traffic or Graceland-generated trips. This creates a specific, distinct category of traffic, suggesting it requires unique solutions. The Tourist Behavior and City Image study from 2015 by the Memphis Convention and Visitors Bureau found that a positive visitor experience, including ease of navigation and minimal traffic, was crucial for Memphis's reputation as a top heritage tourism destination. Therefore, managing Elvis-related traffic becomes part of protecting the city's brand. The narrative also affects resident perception. While some residents might resent the traffic, many also take pride in Elvis and Graceland as part of their city's unique charm. This creates a nuanced local dialogue where frustration over traffic is often tempered by an understanding of the economic and cultural importance of Elvis tourism. A 2016 survey, Local Attitudes Towards Tourism, found that while 70% of residents reported traffic frustration, 60% also agreed that Elvis tourism is essential for Memphis's identity and economy. So Elvis isn't just a historical figure in Memphis, he's a living force that actively shapes the city's traffic narrative. This deep cultural connection influences how traffic problems are perceived, prioritized, discussed, and ultimately addressed. It means traffic management isn't just an engineering problem, it's a cultural challenge steeped in the city's identity. But how much does the specific Elvis branding of the traffic problem deter non-Elvis related businesses or residents from investing in or moving to South Memphis if they perceive it as perpetually congested? Does the city's strong focus on Elvis-related traffic mean that other, equally important traffic problems in different parts of Memphis receive less attention or funding? And if Elvis's popularity were to wane significantly in the future, how would that shift the city's traffic priorities and the narrative around Elvis Presley Boulevard? Could the iconic status of Elvis Presley Boulevard lead to resistance against innovative traffic solutions that might drastically alter its appearance or function, even if they would improve flow? Number one, a broader look, what can other tourist cities learn from Memphis? Memphis isn't unique in having a major tourist attraction that generates significant traffic. Many cities around the world grapple with the same challenges. Theme parks, historical sites, sporting venues, they all draw crowds and cars. But Memphis's experience with Elvis tourism, particularly the decades of studies and the unique cultural context, offers valuable lessons for other cities trying to balance tourism success with urban livability. One key lesson is the importance of early and continuous monitoring. Memphis started formally assessing the traffic impact of Graceland relatively early, soon after its public opening in 1982. The Graceland Opening Impact Assessment from 1983 was a crucial first step. Other cities often wait until congestion becomes a crisis before commissioning studies. But Memphis's experience shows that proactively tracking traffic patterns, even with rudimentary methods, can help anticipate problems and inform long-term planning before they become overwhelming. A 2008 comparative study, Heritage Tourism and Urban Congestion Case Studies from Charleston, Savannah, and Memphis, by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, specifically praised Memphis for its sustained, albeit sometimes disjointed, data collection efforts. Another lesson is the challenge of dedicated infrastructure versus integrated solutions. For years, Memphis focused heavily on Elvis Presley Boulevard itself, trying to widen it or optimize its signals. While necessary, this highlights the fact that focusing solely on the immediate vicinity of an attraction is often insufficient. The later studies, like the 2019 Tito Report Interdistrict Tourist Connectivity, showed that traffic disperses. Other cities need to think about the entire tourist journey from airport to hotel, between attractions, and how it impacts the broader urban network. Charleston, for example, learned this when their historic district tours started spilling over into adjacent residential neighborhoods, leading them to develop comprehensive downtown mobility plans that looked beyond just the main tourist areas. Memphis also teaches about the trade-offs in public transit investment. While Mata tried a dedicated shuttle, it struggled. The studies, like the 2005 Graceland Transit Accessibility Study, clearly showed that tourist preferences for convenience and flexibility often trump the desire to use public transit, especially if it's perceived as slow, unsafe, or confusing. Other cities should learn that simply having public transit isn't enough. It needs to be explicitly designed for tourists, well-marketed, and offer a competitive level of convenience and speed, perhaps with dedicated tourist lines or multimodal passes. Otherwise, ride-sharing will fill that gap and still add cars to the road. The power of comprehensive parking strategies is another critical takeaway. Memphis's journey from scattered, insufficient parking to a massive centralized garage at Graceland and the ongoing struggles with downtown parking illustrate the need for foresight. Cities with major attractions must plan for adequate, well-signed, and strategically located parking. The Downtown Parking Demand Study from 2010 and its findings on cruising for parking is a cautionary tale for any city grappling with high demand in historical or entertainment districts. Investing in smart parking systems and peripheral garages with shuttles can be more effective than trying to create more street parking in already dense areas. Finally, Memphis's experience with Elvis Week underscores the necessity of robust special event planning and emergency response protocols. The scale of congestion during the Candlelight Vigil is extreme, but many cities host annual festivals or major events. The MPD's annual Elvis Week Traffic Operations Plan shows the depth of resources and coordination required. Other cities can learn from Memphis's detailed approach to road closures, rerouting, police deployment, and emergency service contingencies for their own large-scale events. So, while Elvis and Memphis have a unique bond, the traffic challenges they face are universal. The decades of transportation studies offer a rich, if sometimes frustrating, case study in how a city grapples with the success of its most famous son. From the limits of infrastructure to the nuances of human behavior and the promises of technology, Memphis provides a living laboratory for urban planning in the age of tourism. But how effectively are these lessons from Memphis actually being shared and implemented by other cities facing similar tourism-related traffic challenges? Are there specific types of tourist attractions that are inherently more traffic intensive than others, and what characteristics contribute to that? And what are the ethical responsibilities of major tourist attractions themselves to contribute financially and logistically to traffic mitigation efforts in their host cities? Could a global collaborative database of best practices for managing tourist traffic, drawing heavily from detailed case studies like Memphis's, significantly accelerate problem solving in other urban areas?